So there I was, in a mental hospital, sitting down talking with some of my fellow patients. And I go, I wonder why people always say use protection. I mean, when I fuck my girlfriend, I don't use protection. Sometimes I even tried to do it, but she would be like, "Why are you wearing a condom?" And I'd be like, "For protection, dude." And she'd be like, "Why do you need protection if I'm fucking you with a strap on?" And that kind of took off for the other patients, because truth be told, being in a mental hospital is not exactly something fun. But I do what I can to try and make the situation a little bit more, let's just say, lighthearted, because there's a lot of heavy stuff going on in mental hospitals. But that's kind of the main topic that I wanted to get into for this video. I wanted to talk about the role of nurses, because the nurse in that situation, she was like, "Okay, Eusebius, what the fuck?" And she was like, "Okay, I'm gonna move over here. I'd appreciate it if you stop talking about that kind of stuff. Now I'm just gonna move over here," because she was sitting at us, and it was during free time. And during free time, you can do things like play cards, checkers, whatever, apples to apples, I think it's called. Or is that apples and oranges? Whatever. It's like PG, Cards Against Humanity, but whatever. You can also do things like Connect Four and a bunch of other stuff. It's mainly board games and card games, because things like video games were kind of not exactly liked, especially in a mental hospital, because if you're giving them video games, it's like they're going to be prioritizing video games over treatment, and they're going to be prioritizing the time that they have to play video games rather than prioritizing the time that they have stimulating their brain while they're playing, like board games or cards or something. But when I went to the mental hospital, there were many things that stood out to me. For one, the nurses were very, let's just say, knowledgeable. I think that's a good way of saying it, because okay, so in a mental hospital, there are multiple roles. There are therapists, there are nurses, there are PAs, psychiatric assistants, and another is MTs, mental health technician, I think it's called. Anyway, there are various peoples. And then there are the people who are just there to, like security and stuff like that. And let's just say the nurses were very questioning about the things I would do. You see, strange behavior isn't exactly something that is not seen in a mental hospital, but the behavior I was exhibiting was very, let's just say, not exactly something you would expect people in a mental hospital to be doing. So, an example of that would be, we would have these situations happen where two patients would get too close together. And normally, that's when one of the PAs or MTs or nurse or whatever, that's when they come in and they say, "Hey, no, boundaries." So I started this thing where everybody lifts up their finger, touches tips, and we'd be like, "Dude, touch my tip." So we would all get in a circle and touch our fingertips together and say boundaries all at the same time. It was an odd behavior, but it was something that kept the mood light. I think me and another patient came up with that, because it definitely wasn't just for me. It was a collaborative work. Maybe me and a couple other patients did that. But continuing on, in my second mental hospital stay, I didn't try to be as much of a joker, because the nurses there were the kind of people who didn't take shit from nobody. They were very, very, let's just say, extreme. They were very extreme, like, "Hey, what are you doing with that fork?" Because there were occasions where patients would steal forks and hurt themselves with them. So we had to put all our forks in this little plastic bag. And basically, stuff like that. I mean, the nurses were a lot more hardcore than my first mental hospital stay. But my third mental hospital stay, oh man, it was kind of weird. So there are many situations, but the one that pops out to me the most is our therapist. We were in group therapy, and our therapist, he was saying, "Okay, what are some aspects of a person that you would want to have? What are some aspects about somebody or somebody's life that you would want to have?" And me, not even knowing that I'm saying this out loud, but I'm saying, man, I really want to be black. And for some reason, everyone heard me say that. And then it took me a second because I looked up and everybody's looking at me. And then one person starts laughing, then everybody starts laughing because like you had that little moment of silence where everybody's like confused as to what the fuck's going on. Like this kid said he wanted to be black. And I'm just sitting here, my Asian self sitting, and I'm like, oh shit, I said that out loud. But yeah, humor is definitely something that you want to have while in a mental hospital. The nurses who were at my third stay in a mental hospital, they were a lot more chill. They didn't really get up into your business and tell you what to do kind of thing. But yeah, humor is just a very, very important thing when it comes to being in a situation like that, as with anything, as is with life. You need to have humor. You need to have some sort of way for you to be able to recognize that there are certain things that is okay to be treated as a way to lift up your self-esteem, if that makes any sense. I don't think it makes sense, but anyway, if you're in an emergency, I have emergency links down below. You can check out my DMs on my Instagram, whatever, and I'll see you in the next one. Ahui ho, malama pono.